Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Dr. Ethan Hayes stood at the precipice of history. The hum of the massive quantum stabilizer filled the sterile air of the Chronodynamics Institute's core lab, a steady reminder of the monumental leap humanity was about to take. The facility, buried deep beneath the Earth's surface to shield the world from potential fallout, was a marvel of modern science. Its walls, lined with complex circuitry and reinforced by layers of state-of-the-art alloys, were designed to contain forces no one fully understood yet. Ethan's heart raced as he adjusted the suit's sensors one final time. The suit, a masterpiece of nanotechnology, clung to his form like a second skin, capable of withstanding the pressures of temporal distortion. Every fiber was interwoven with quantum processors, each designed to keep him anchored to the present as he ventured into the unknown. He glanced at the control room through the thick, reinforced glass. His colleagues, a group of the world's leading physicists and engineers, were a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Their eyes were on him, some with confidence, others with the fear they dared not express. "Ready, Dr. Hayes?" The voice of Dr. Susan Caldwell, the project lead, crackled over the intercom. She was the epitome of calm professionalism, but Ethan knew her well enough to detect the underlying tension in her tone. "Ready as I'll ever be," he replied, forcing a grin he hoped would hide his own nerves. This was it. Years of theoretical work, endless simulations, and now he was about to be the first human to travel through time. The countdown began. Ethan's pulse synchronized with the ticking clock, each second louder than the last. The room's lights dimmed as power was diverted to the quantum stabilizer. He took a deep breath, the suit's internal systems monitoring his vitals and responding to the spike in adrenaline by releasing calming agents into his bloodstream. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A surge of energy coursed through the chamber as the stabilizer activated, enveloping Ethan in a shimmering cocoon of light. The world around him dissolved into a blur of colors and shapes, stretching and warping in ways that defied logic. He felt an intense pressure, as if the fabric of reality itself was squeezing him from all sides. Then, just as suddenly, it was over. Ethan staggered, disoriented. The world around him solidified, and he found himself standing in an open field under a clear blue sky. The crisp air was filled with the scent of grass and the distant murmur of a stream. He blinked, his mind struggling to process the abrupt transition from the sterile lab to this tranquil setting. He looked around, trying to get his bearings. The field was vast, bordered by a dense forest on one side and rolling hills on the other. There were no signs of civilization, no landmarks he recognized. His first thought was that the experiment had succeeded, he had traveled through time. But something was wrong. This wasn't the future he was supposed to see. The environment was too untouched, too pristine. It felt ancient, primordial. Ethan activated the suit's diagnostic systems. The display in his helmet flickered to life, showing a barrage of error messages. The temporal anchor had malfunctioned, and the suit couldn't lock onto the return coordinates. He was stranded. Panic threatened to overtake him, but Ethan forced it down. He was a scientist, trained to deal with the unexpected. He had to stay calm, think rationally. The first step was to figure out where, or rather when, he was. He checked the suit's temporal sensors, but the data was inconclusive. The suit couldn't pinpoint the exact date, all it could tell him was that he was far from his intended destination. Too far. Ethan scanned the horizon, searching for anything that might give him a clue. He spotted a faint trail leading into the forest. It was a slim chance, but it was all he had. He started walking, the suit's systems compensating for the uneven terrain. As he entered the forest, the trees closed in around him, their branches forming a canopy that filtered the sunlight into dappled patterns on the ground. The air was cooler here, filled with the earthy scent of moss and decaying leaves. The trail wound deeper into the woods, and Ethan followed it, his mind racing with questions. Where was he? How far back had he gone? And more importantly, how was he going to get home? After what felt like hours, the trail led him to a small clearing. In the center stood a structure that took his breath away. It was a stone circle, ancient and weathered, with intricate carvings etched into the surface of each monolith. Ethan approached cautiously, the scientist in him marveling at the sheer age of the structure. This was a place of power, he could feel it. The carvings on the stones were a mix of symbols and pictographs, none of which he recognized. They seemed to depict a story, a narrative of some sort, but the meaning was lost to him. What caught his attention, however, was the central stone. Unlike the others, it had a flat surface that looked like it was meant to hold something. Ethan knelt down and examined the stone closely. There were grooves in the surface, as if something had been placed here repeatedly over the centuries. He placed his hand on it, and to his astonishment, the stone responded. A soft hum emanated from the circle, and the carvings began to glow with a faint blue light. Before he could react, the ground beneath him shifted. The stone circle began to rotate, the monoliths moving with a precision that belied their ancient appearance. Ethan stumbled back, his heart pounding as the central stone rose into the air, revealing a hidden chamber beneath. The chamber was small, just large enough for one person. Inside was a pedestal with a device on it, a device that looked disturbingly similar to the one he had used in the lab. Ethan's mind raced. How could this be here? This was far beyond the technological capabilities of the time period he believed himself to be in. He stepped into the chamber, the air around him humming with energy. The device on the pedestal was made of a material he couldn't identify, and it was covered in more of the strange symbols. His hand hovered over it, hesitating. This was either his way home or a trap. But he didn't have a choice. He had to take the risk. Ethan reached out and touched the device. Instantly, the world around him shifted again. The stone chamber dissolved, replaced by a different landscape, a barren wasteland under a blood-red sky. The air was thick with dust, and the ground was cracked and dry, as if the very life had been sucked out of the earth. He was somewhere else, someone else. The transition was disorienting, but he forced himself to stay focused. The device had transported him again, but this time it felt different. There was a purpose to it, as if the device was guiding him. The suit systems were still malfunctioning, but Ethan managed to get a partial reading. The temporal signature of this place was different from the last. He was moving forward in time, but not in a linear fashion. It was as if he was being pushed through different branches of reality, each one more alien than the last. As he struggled to make sense of his surroundings, Ethan noticed something on the horizon, a structure, barely visible through the dust. He started walking toward it, his mind racing with questions. Was this another trap, or was it part of the path home? The structure turned out to be a massive fortress, its walls towering over the barren landscape. It looked ancient, yet strangely well preserved, as if it had been built to withstand the ravages of time. The gates were open, inviting him in. Ethan hesitated at the entrance. Everything about this place felt wrong, but he had no other options. He stepped inside, the gates closing behind him with a resounding clang. The interior of the fortress was dark and cold, the air thick with a sense of foreboding. He felt like he was being watched, but there was no one around. He moved cautiously through the corridors, his footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The fortress was a labyrinth, with twisting passages and dead ends. Ethan tried to keep track of his path, but it was hopeless. The fortress seemed to defy logic, its layout shifting and changing as he moved deeper into its heart. After what felt like hours, he reached a large chamber at the center of the fortress. In the middle of the chamber was another pedestal, identical to the one he had found in the stone circle. On it was another device, this one larger and more complex. Ethan approached it slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. He could feel it. The device was the key to everything, the way home, the answers he had been seeking. But there was something else here too, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. A presence that he couldn't see it, but he could feel it, an overwhelming sense of dread that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the fortress. Ethan's hand hovered over the device, hesitating. He knew that once he activated it, there would be no turning back, but he had come too far to stop now. That he took a deep breath and pressed the activation switch. The device hummed to life, and the world around him began to shift once again. But this time, it was different. Instead of being transported to another timeline, the fortress itself began to change. The walls shimmered, and the air crackled with energy. The presence he had felt grew stronger, almost tangible now. Ethan felt a cold hand grip his heart as he realized what was happening. The fortress wasn't just a structure, it was alive, a sentient being that had been waiting for someone like him to activate the device. That he tried to pull away, but it was too late. The device had locked onto him, drawing him into its web. The fortress was feeding on his energy, using him to power its transformation. Ethan's mind raced as he tried to find a way out, but there was no escape. He was trapped, a prisoner of time and space. The fortress continued to change, its walls warping and twisting as it absorbed more of his energy. Ethan could feel himself weakening, his consciousness slipping away. But even as the darkness closed in, he refused to give up. He had survived too much to let it end like this. Summoning the last of his strength, he focused on the device, willing it to stop. He didn't know if it would work, but he had to try. He poured every ounce of his willpower into the effort, forcing the device to shut down. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a shuddering groan, the fortress began to collapse. The walls crumbled, the air filled with the sound of breaking stone and the roar of energy being released. Ethan felt the grip of the fortress loosen, and he pulled himself free, staggering back as the chamber disintegrated around him. The device flickered, its power fading. Ethan watched in a daze as the fortress dissolved into nothingness, leaving him standing alone in the middle of a vast, empty plain. The sky was a dull gray, and the ground beneath his feet was cold and lifeless. He was free, but at what cost? The fortress was gone, but so were his hopes of finding a way home. The device had been his last chance, and now it was destroyed. He was trapped in this timeline, with no way back. Ethan sank to his knees, the weight of his situation finally hitting him. He was alone, stranded in a world that wasn't his own, with no way to return. The thought was almost too much to bear, but as he sat there, staring at the barren landscape, something stirred within him. A memory, a flash of insight. The device wasn't just a tool, it was a key. A key to something bigger, something that had been hidden from him all along. He looked around, his mind racing. The clues were there, scattered across the timelines he had visited. The anomalies, the patterns, the strange symbols, they all pointed to one thing. Someone had been guiding him, pushing him toward a destination he hadn't even realized existed. Ethan stood up, determination replacing despair. He wasn't done yet. The journey wasn't over. He had been so focused on finding a way home that he hadn't seen the bigger picture. There was a secret hidden in the fabric of time itself, a secret that someone wanted to keep buried, but he was going to uncover it. He had to. It was the only way to find his way back. With renewed purpose, Ethan set off across the plain, the weight of his situation lifting as he focused on the task ahead. He didn't know what he would find, or how long it would take, but he knew one thing for certain, that he wasn't alone. The presence he had felt in the fortress was still with him, but it was different now. It wasn't a malevolent force, it was a guide, a companion. Something, or someone, was helping him. And he was going to find out who. The journey would be long, and the challenges would be great. But Ethan Hayes was a survivor. He had faced the impossible and come out the other side. He would do it again. As he walked, the sky began to change. The dull gray gave way to a soft blue, and the ground beneath his feet started to come alive with the first signs of vegetation. It was as if the world itself was responding to his determination, reshaping itself in response to his will. Ethan smiled, the first genuine smile he had felt in a long time. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he was ready for whatever came next, because he was more than just a time traveler. He was a prisoner of time, but he was also its master. And he was going to unlock the secrets of the universe, one timeline at a time.